All of the food we eat and much of the clothing we wear comes from plants and animals that are raised on farms. Farms are different in type, in size, and even in name.
Welcome to Barn Talk. What happens at the barn stays in the barn, but not today. We're going to let it all out for you guys. Today is going to be a guest episode. We got a really cool guest coming on that does a lot of awesome stuff in the agricultural industry, a lot of great stuff for farmers, and we're going to touch on all the things that he's up to. But before we do, you guys know the drill. Share the show with the people that you know. The more that you guys do that, the more that this show grows, the more people we can reach, the more episodes we can make. It's kind of the ticket to admission to watch or listen to the show. Another thing you can do to help us here at Barn Talk is leave a review on Spotify or Apple. We're up to 3,000 five-star reviews on Spotify. We're getting close to that 2,000 five-star review mark on Apple. So we appreciate you guys doing that. Last thing you can do to support us here at Barn Talk and our farm is you can support our direct-to-consumer meat business, Farmer Grade, farmergrade.com. We work with all kinds of American family farms that are raising high-quality meat and sharing their story, showing what they do on their farm every day. We got American Wagyu, Black Angus beef, pasture-raised chicken, pork that we raise on our farm, and much more. You can use code BARNTALK to save 10% off your next order, and that code will always be available to you guys that are loyal listeners and watchers of Barn Talk. We got holiday gift boxes coming up. So if you're somebody that owns a business and you want to give your employees something awesome, you want to give them some meat for Christmas, we will have that feature available coming very soon. Or if you're just a person, you want to get your loved ones a box of meat for the holidays, that we have that for you too. So I just want to put that bug in your guys' ear so you can kind of plan for it. We do have a rewards program now on Farmer Grade where you earn points for spending money. So the more money you spend, the more orders you have, you earn points, and you can redeem those points for money off. And then if you spend enough money, there's tiers of kind of you unlock as you spend more money.
Tears of joy.
Tears of joy unlocks some features for you that gives you perks to being a loyal customer of Farmer Grade, because we want to incentivize loyalty. Harvest is in full swing for us. Yesterday we did beans over at David's. We tried corn over here on Monday.
Too wet.
Just picked the headlands off. Yeah, it's been good so far. These first couple days, the joy is high. It brings you back to being like, oh yeah, I love this. I enjoy this. But there's going to be a point in there where it's going to be like, oh shit, this is starting to be a grind.
Yeah, let's just get done with this.
Yeah. But no, it's been real fun, real good. And if you're interested at all of seeing our harvest trial and errors and all the good highlights and low lights or low moments, you can head over to our This'll Do Farm YouTube channel, and we kind of just vlog and document our day-to-day life as farmers, and harvest is included in that. So you can see Torque and I being a dumbass, probably leaving a wagon door open from time to time and spilling corn on the ground.
Bring that up.
Well,
I haven't done that this year.
Nope, not yet.
No.
I'll probably be the one to do it this year now. Knock on wood. All right, well, our guest today is a kind of a pioneer in the ag media space. He does a lot of great things for the agricultural industry. He does a lot of different media stuff, content stuff for farmers and agricultural businesses and stuff like that. He really is passionate about agriculture, and he doesn't really come from it, which is awesome. Having people that don't come from agriculture get passionate about agriculture and make a difference, I think is really key for our future as an industry. And I'm super excited to have the conversation with him today. Something that where I first saw this guy was actually on social media. There was a clip of him being on a podcast, and he was saying, they were talking about documentaries and how there's so many bad documentaries out there bashing agriculture. And he said on there, my goal is, if all those people are going to be in that corner bashing agriculture, I want to counter that and make documentaries promoting agriculture, because a lot of those documentaries, as we all know, don't actually get to the nitty-gritty facts all the time. They just like to touch on hot points that sound good but might not always be the full story. And I just could really appreciate that as a farmer. So I'm super happy that we can get him on the show, and I'm hyped to get it going. So without further ado, let's get to it. Clayton Lynn, we're live, so welcome to Barn Talk. Thanks for coming down, man.
I've been following along for quite a few years now. So
yeah, well, I was going to say, I said it in the intro, where I first saw you was, I think you were doing a podcast. It wasn't Farm for Profit. It was a different one, but I think this clip went pretty viral. It was you talking about how, there's so many documentaries, pushing against ag and bashing our industry. And your mission is like, you want to counteract that. You want to combat that. And if they're going to make shitty documentaries about agriculture, I'm going to make documentaries about promoting agriculture and actually showing the other side of the story. Because there's always documentaries, it seems like there's always extreme pullers on whatever their narrative is. And the truth usually lies in the middle, just like everything. But that clip really made me want to get you on the podcast. So I'm finally glad we got you down here, and we'll chop it up.
Well, I'm psyched about that. I mean, it's probably been 6 or 7 months since I put that clip up. We're talking about it. And so it's been an absolute wild year.
Yeah.
The principle's still running the same. We were working on 2 documentaries, probably starting February, March-ish. And one, we were partnering with someone else, and we're still kind of waiting on what that looks like. And then the other one, we went from, a team of 3 to a team of 7 and now 8. And so I want to say it's been on the back burner. It's been hey, if we're going to do this, let's scale back. Not even scale back, let's slow down and do it right. So just an update on all that. We're still working on it. It's just a matter of I wanted it to be done in January. And now we're like, all right, if we're going to do this, let's put could we put a full quarter of one person's work into this? Like, could I pay for one of my employees to spend a whole quarter working on this? And so we're kind of trying to rework that right now of like, hey, if we're going to do this, let's put a lot of energy, because we were putting energy behind it before, but it was always like, oh, we have a half a day here or another day here, but now we're kind of sitting here looking, okay, if we want to do this, could we do this with could we shoot super hard for a few weeks and then chop something up? Could we, we wanted to do a full growing season. We still want to do that, but it's so hard to all right, I have a person here, we have people from on the West Coast on our team all the way to Oklahoma and Texas, and us in Iowa. So we're trying to figure out how can we do this efficiently, but also we want to produce something we're proud of, not just do it with our spare time. And so that's our Q1 project of next year. It's a Q4 goal right now. So we're currently September to December. So we're looking at, okay, let's develop our game plan. Let's find our story. Let's find our people. And let's set up a schedule for how we're actually going to produce this whole thing. And then Q1 next year, we're going to plan on moving into okay, this person's going to be here, this person's going to be here. And hopefully we can get a couple of our people on set with someone. So all that has changed dramatically probably since you last saw that clip, but it's still, the principle is still fundamentally the same of, hey, let's create something that's actually going to accomplish our mission, which our mission is serve agriculture at a high level by solving its most pressing issues. And currently the most pressing issue I feel like we need to solve is no one knows where their food comes from. We have so many people who love to just bash this industry without knowing anything about it. So what can we do as an industry to tangibly solve that? Because people love to complain about that problem all day long of no one knows where their food comes from. Oh my gosh, we have it so hard as farmers. And I'm like, okay, so what are we going to do about it? We can sit here all day and complain about how Joe Schmo in California doesn't know anything about pork producers in Iowa and how, the whole Prop 12 thing or whatever, all that, we could sit here all day and complain about that, which is what we've been doing for several decades now as an industry. Or hear me out, guys, let's find a tangible solution to the problem. And I'm not saying I have all the answers, because I don't. And you guys know this as well. It's it's going to take a multitude of people saying, well, that's a problem, let's do something about it. And you guys have also realized, as we have, oh man, social media, YouTube, podcasts can connect you with millions of people around the country. Why aren't we leveraging that to solve this pressing issue? And so that's how I view it, is okay, well, easiest way for me to start that, okay, start a marketing company, because you can generate revenue, generate profit, which allows me to then dedicate some of that profit back into things that more or less don't provide. There's no ROI directly in creating a documentary for me or my business, but we have a problem. It needs to be solved. And at the end of the day, it is good marketing and PR for us. But at the end of the day, it's, hey, even if it makes a small indent, it makes enough of an indent that, hey, maybe next time it'll be bigger, or the time after that will be bigger. And so that's kind of the approach we've taken, is like, all right, let's do it, but let's do it to the best of our ability rather than our spare time. So we kind of reworked how that's going to look in the future. But it's something that, like, when we can pull it off, I'm so
stoked
excited.
for.
Yeah. So excited.
So what is your company called for people that don't know? And you kind of explained the mission, but like, what do you do when you're not thinking about producing documentaries? So
yeah. So our company is called Atlas Media Solutions. That's the official LLC name, but I would call us actually Atlas Ag Media Solutions. And we're trying to, Atlas Ag, we just call it Atlas usually, just because it's like, as a company, it's easier just to refer to the entity as Atlas. But that's like the whole thing we do. We are a media marketing company for ag businesses, because I realize now that I'm a few years into this, there are other companies that do it, but there's a pretty big gap once again between, okay, hey, let's print a bunch of newspaper ads, and hey, let's produce some social media marketing material. And there's all this territory in between that most other marketing companies in this industry are still figuring out a little bit. So we actually get a ton of work from other marketing agencies, because they realize, oh, we need to do more video, we need to do more photo.
And we don't have anybody to do that.
Yeah, like, we got to get on social media and do this. And so they call us saying, hey, that's kind of what you guys do, right? And we do other things as well, but like, our main bread and butter is social media, because what's the easiest way to reach your customers these days? Social media. Yeah. And what is the easiest way to have a genuine connection with someone? I mean, it's sad to say, social media these days, and I'll give credit to the other marketing agencies of print is still big in the ag industry. Like most people, the average age of someone in this industry is 55. People like to read magazines. They like to read newspapers. So that is all fine and dandy. But we have this next generation of farmers and ranchers coming up through the industry. And where are they going to be searching for stuff in 3 to 4 years when they take over the operation? TikTok, Instagram, maybe Facebook, maybe Twitter,
YouTube.
Maybe even LinkedIn. Who knows? So that's kind of the premise of our company. So we've got 7 people working, doing 90% photo video, and then we do a little bit of graphics and web design when it comes in and things like that. But I'd say 95% of it is social media. And our goal this year was like, hey, could we reach 100 million people across us and our clients on social media for the sake of agriculture? It's like, okay, tangible way for us to accomplish our mission, gives us incentive as a team to do our best job possible. Hopefully it's helping our clients get the best return on their dollars spent. And on top of that, the chances that someone in that 100 million people is outside the ag bubble is quite high. So like, okay, it's a step in the right direction. It's not the answer, but it's a step. Who knows who could see that and say, oh man, like, that's kind of cool. I never thought a combine would be something I would want to see, or I don't even know what this machine is, but it looked really cool because that video is really pretty. It's that, the execution of something tangible that might actually make an impact in some Californian's life or some city slicker's life. Who, you have no idea who you're going to reach when you do stuff like that. And I'm sure you guys see that all the time on your guys' stuff. Like, you'll get comments from people or messages saying, I had no idea what was going on out on this hog farm in Iowa, but you guys showed it to me and it was super cool. And now I want to buy pork from you, or, I want to follow along. I want to learn more. It's that little cycle. So that's kind of like the very high level, like, this is what we do every day. I mean, most of my job is spent in the office these days, looking at spreadsheets, sitting in meetings, sending emails. I do some of the photo video stuff too. I probably go out on 1 shoot a month, but 90% of it's running the business and not glamorous. I don't post a lot of it. I posted on my social media yesterday saying, hey, just so everyone knows, I spend most of my time sitting at this desk these days. You see all the pretty stuff and fun stuff that we get to do on social media, but like, this is the work that I got to do right now to make sure that we can accomplish the mission we're setting out to accomplish. Yeah. So
somebody's got to make sure the light bill gets paid.
I wrote a lot of checks yesterday. Yeah.
There was a point in there you talked about how your mission as a company, or just like this year, you wanted to reach 100 million people across your social and your clients. How important, like, I go back and forth on this as somebody that owns a small business too. Like, what do you feel like having a goal, or like an annual goal or a 5-year goal or a 5-year plan focused on a different metric than money is like better than focusing on money? Because I feel like there's a lot of companies out there that, oh, we got to hit $1 million in revenue. We got to hit 500,000 in revenue. And your team becomes almost money hungry. and you lose sight of what really matters. And I feel like what I tell myself anyway is like, I think the money will come if we just focus on doing the right thing. Is that kind of what you found too?
So it's funny you asked that. So probably since June, since we became kind of this multi-person organization and we continue to add on more people every single month, it seems like it's like, okay, now the what we believe and why we do what we do is so much more important than it was when it was just me. Because when I'm the one working every day and doing 80% of the work, it's like, okay, well, I know why I'm doing this. I know what I'm doing. But now we're at the point where we've got to boil that down into, hey, what do I need to communicate to our team that's going to propel this vision and mission forward? Because I can tell our teams like, yeah, I'd like to do a few million in revenue next year. That would be really cool. But to them, like, if they, some of them don't have a ton of farm background. Most of them have a little, but not a lot, So how do I convey to my team that what we do every day is important? Because if I just tell them, yeah, I want to make a couple million next year, they're like, well, my boss just wants us to make a bunch of money so he can go on vacation, as the owner of the business, like that's how it would come off as. And so I've been, for the past 4-ish months now, really just reading a ton of books, listening to a ton of podcasts of what does it look like to, have core values, set a vision, set targets, set things like that aren't just, revenue is a part of that. You can't forget that, but you have to find something that supersedes that. And so we actually just sat down about 2 weeks ago and went over our core values as a business. We're officially starting to establish those. They're things that are going to matter as we hire going forward. And one of the ones that we put down, I think it's like number 3, is people, principle, profit. So you got your people first. So taking care of our customers, taking care of our employees, and more importantly, because we serve agriculture, our farmers and ranchers. One of our other core values is our customers come first. So we serve ag businesses. So we work with a lot of big ag businesses that serve farmers and ranchers. Farmers and ranchers are more important than the ag businesses we serve. And if we think the company we work with is not serving those people's best interests, we will not work with this company. Like we say no to companies all the time because we are like, I don't think you have the farmer's best interest at heart. So we are not going to work with you because there's some other marketing company that'll take your money and they'll go buy a boat. That's not why we're here to do. I'm here to make sure that farmers and ranchers' voices are heard, they're seen, and they're taken care of. And if that company doesn't believe in that, then that company can get out the door because that's not what we're here to do.
Making a purpose to make money does not make a culture. And if you don't have a culture, you won't have a company very long. I mean, it is, I've had the pleasure to work some places where we had an incredible culture and I watched it change. And then I've worked at other places that didn't have a culture and it made it really difficult. So getting that established early is...
You're
on the right road.
You're on the right road. I'm kind of still so early and I don't really have a full-time team. So it's like just kind of grinding right now. But like, when you get to that point of having people that are in the office every day, and I think then I got to really make that transition.
Yeah. This is a book you should write down. I would recommend anyone who goes from 1 to 2 people, even like the book. People always told me like, oh, don't read it until you got 5+ people working for you. And I wish I had read this book. It's called Traction by, have you read it?
I've heard of it. I have not read it.
It's by Gino Wickman. There's a lot of business books out there that will say, oh, do this. And it's like, well, they're coming from the perspective of, oh, I've been running a multi-million-dollar business for 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 years now. So they're coming from this very high level and they've forgotten what it's like to like go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 people. This book, Traction, it takes a little bit of time to get to the point, but it gives you very tangible tools of like, oh, here are things that you should implement with your team on a regular basis that will help you reach your goals and set your direction so you can start actually like solving the problems and moving forward. And it is, I wish I had read it 2 years ago because it would have at least given me a framework of like, okay, in this order, do a couple of these things to help you at least stop putting out fires all the time. Like your job as a business owner should not be to just put out fires constantly. It's always going to happen. You have to live with it. But if you are constantly putting out fires, you're not running a healthy organization because your people do not know what they're supposed to be doing and they have to always call you to put out their fires. Well, that doesn't get you anywhere because you can do that with a couple people. You can't do that with 10 people. You can't do that with 50 people. You can't do that with 100 people. So you have to start moving from this is me and my team to this is me and my team And my job is to work with my team and coach my team and empower them. Yeah. Like, I was able to take, we started implementing this kind of beginning of summer. I was able to take a whole week off and go on vacation in July. And I sent one work email the entire week, which if anyone here runs a business listening, you know how hard that is to not be like, to go on vacation for a week and not be worrying. And I had to respond to one email. And the only reason I did, because it was like 7:00 at night. And I was like, it's like a 2-sentence email just to check in with a client. Like that was it. I was like, I don't need to forward this to someone else to take. And it was one of the most like, okay, I love my job. I love working. But if there's a difference between being a workaholic and working hard. Being a workaholic is incredibly unhealthy, and working hard is one of the best virtues you can have as an employee. But you can't be a workaholic and work hard. There's a difference.
Right.
So like it is, don't get me wrong, I still work like probably 50, 60 hours a week, but it's definitely changed the way I approach our problems and stuff. And it's changed the way we address our problems too. And it's just been like, dude, read that book.
All right, you got me sold. I'm going to buy it and read it.
Yeah. Well, hey, gosh dang. Let's back up a minute. So what was your why? How long has Atlas been going? Like, when did you start? And what was your aha moment that you were like, all right, I'm gonna
because you don't come from ag, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so just give us a little background.
Let's back way up. Okay.
Yeah.
California. Let's just say California, my childhood. So I was born in Lake Tahoe, California. Beautiful area. Like, you want to talk about the most spoiled rotten growing up at, like, we were like in California, what we consider middle class in Iowa is like kind of on that lower end of middle class. So we lived in a ski town. It's pretty expensive. So I didn't grow up with a bunch of money living in a ski town. Like, my mom ran her own house cleaning business. My parents were separated when I was younger. So my mom ran her own house cleaning business just to pay the bills, while we were growing up. So like from like 11 on, she basically worked full time. We went to school, we did our thing. And that kind of, say that now, that created a lot of independence in my life that has led me to be able to, withstand some of the entrepreneurship and just the going out on your own mentality. I've always kind of had that of like, if no one else is going to do it, then I'm going to go do it. Cause growing up, I had to do it. I had one little brother, and,
no one's coming.
My brother, I'll give a shout out to him. He works for me, and he's the same way. He just takes ownership. He goes and does stuff. Like, if I ask him to do something, he'll work a 16-hour day and I'll never ask, and he'll just go do it, Anyways, grew up in California. When I was 16, I ended up moving to Montana for a few years. So I graduated early because I said, this whole high school thing is kind of, I've learned everything I need to know. So I went to a charter school there, so it was 4-day work week or 4-day school week. Fridays was an independent study day, which I either went skiing or I worked. So I would do that, and I realized, I've learned everything I need to know. And so California has a test that you can take to basically test out early. So it's called the California High School Proficiency Exam. It gives you your diploma and everything. So I was 16. I had 2 years of school left, but I was like, I'm 1,000% confident I could pass that test. So got the sign off from my principal and my mom, went and took the test. So I graduated December of 2016, I think. So graduated then and moved to Montana.
Boy, don't you wish you could have done that?
I don't know. I don't know if I would have passed the test.
You would have had to find somebody to take it.
Yeah, I didn't apply myself all too much in high school, but
and I would say that last semester I did like jack squat, but like I was pretty good at math. So like math was the only one I was like, that's really the only thing they actually test you on in the high school. Like, that's really the only thing they care about is, can you do algebra? Like, that's pretty much it. Like, social studies, geography, doesn't really matter. None of that. It's, can you do math? So I had already done calculus at that point. So I was like, that was the easiest part. Flew through the test, did it in like 30 minutes when it was supposed to be like 3 hours. It was great that I was able to do that. And most other people finished at like 45 minutes. So it's an incredibly easy test. So don't feel bad. I moved up to Montana, lived there for a few years. I worked for a Christian camp out there for a few years. They had horses. That's where I got that's my first time I ever started working on fence, which I learned to do a lot more of later. So I've fixed miles of barbed wire fence. I've taken out miles of barbed wire fence. It's one of the best character building things you can do is fix fence, because it's the lowest. You are the lowest man on the totem pole when you're fixing fence, and that's okay. That's okay. It's good for you. Lived out there for 4 years. COVID hits 2020. lost my job, lost my place of housing. I happened to be dating a girl who lived in Iowa because I worked with her brother out in Montana. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just move to Iowa, And so I had also gotten some diesel mechanic experience working for an excavation company whenever I would go visit home. So I would just, if I went home for a few weeks, I would just go wrench. It was by no means a proficient mechanic, but if you asked me to fix something, I could probably sort of figure it out. So moved to Iowa. The girl I was dating at the time, her cousin farmed. And so it was the middle of COVID. There's nowhere to work. And I was like, well, I know how to tear up fence. I know how to fix fence. I can fix stuff. I can go farm. I think I could probably go figure this out. And so anyways, I went up and just did a couple days of work. He had a bunch of little small chemical pumps for just spraying and everything. And I basically just cleaned the carburetors on all of them. He's like, man, you're pretty good at that. And I was like, you just there's a couple bolts and everything. Fixing a carburetor. Guys, if your small engine's having trouble, it's the carburetor. Just take it off, clean it. I've never not fixed a small engine that way. So, but yeah, he, a couple days later is like, you just want to come work for me full time. I need some extra help. My dad's getting a little older. We also just have, it's a farm. He had cows, he did row crop, hay, all that. So, he's a very busy guy. And so I was like, sure. And guys, I cannot stress enough how little I knew about anything involving farming, the practices, the process, the tools I needed. All those things were things I just got absolutely schooled on every single day. It was I basically realized I was just a monkey that happened to be able to drive mostly, so that just kind of I was like, okay, this is the only job there is to do right now, so I'm gonna do it. And I can say I really enjoyed it. There were a lot of hard days. I did not have the best attitude every single day. But more often than not, I got to do something different every single day, which if you ask the guy I farm for what his favorite part about farming is, he would tell you that. It's I never do the same thing every single day, ever. Right. And I can look back and say, man, what freedom was there in just doing something different every day? Yeah, it was a lot of hard work. When you have cows, everything's a project all the time. You have any sort of animals, you're always working with the animals. Yep. The row crop is when we have time, we get it done. But it's the cows took up so much of our time. But if it was in Northeast Iowa, and if you've ever been up there, start getting to those rolling hills, it's just one of the most beautiful places. Talk about the best place to harvest in the fall, Northeast Iowa, when all the leaves are changing. You're sitting there driving grain cart, going through the hills. I've got these distinct memories. We would do all of our edge rows along the trees, and it's just sunset, best. Orange leaves, just driving behind the combine as you're opening everything up. Oh man,
you lived in some pretty awesome, beautiful places. It sounds like.
Yeah, I have.
You've gone to some real nice places.
When I now live in Waterloo Cedar Falls, which no offense to Waterloo Cedar Falls, it's definitely
That's probably the worst place.
One of the ugliest cities in Iowa, which is really saying something for the state of Iowa. We don't we have a couple pretty parts, but for the most part, it's a bunch of 1 mile by 1 mile fields for the most of it. And every once in a while, there's a little hill that goes up and down, and then you get towards I always tell people Iowa's really great once you get pretty close to Wisconsin, Yeah. But all that to say is absolutely gorgeous area. I miss being out. I miss working outside so much. Some days, I'm just I should just ask if he needs some fence fix so I can just go spend a day in the side by side, with a couple, I could spend 8 hours in a side by side by myself, just checking fence, fixing fence. There's just something so freeing about that. Mm-hmm. Anyways, farming was great. It was hard, but I loved it. As I was farming, I realized, I've had a totally massive misconception about the entire agriculture industry. I lived in Montana, they had cows out there, but it's cowboy culture. I always just kind of wrote it off as okay, yeah, they've got cows, never got super involved with the livestock side of things or things like that, And where I grew up in California, there was not a lot of agriculture, which looking back now, California is the largest ag state in the country. Yep. And it is the primary driver of their entire economy. Even compared to, Google and Apple being based there, it's
as much as they'd like to not admit it.
Oh yeah. And so anyways, I knew nothing growing up where I did, every once in a while you meet someone who has horses or, if you drove a little bit north, you'd find some cows, but I knew nothing. And so as I was working with this guy I was farming for, Tyler, if you ever listen to this podcast, you totally blew my mind on almost a daily basis for the things I was learning. But he would just tell me these things about did you know that corn gets turned into this, or that they use this part of the cow for this after it's processed, or hey, did you know that this is actually how we do things? And that's actually not what, I would ask questions well, What about this? You know, like, what about spraying this? Or, you know, what about, you know, we do finish our cows in a feedlot for a couple months. Like, what about this? You know, like, I'd always been told feedlot bad or spraying chemicals bad, you know, and as I was there working every day, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been so wrong about things. Like, the way they do things, there's a reason that, you know, farmers and ranchers do the things they do, is because like that is the best way they have found to do it. And I'm not saying everything we do in this industry is right. I'm not going to say that. Like, I will always say, like, we have had plenty of missteps like every other industry has, you know. Every single industry has made mistakes. And I'm not saying everything we do now is perfect, but what I am saying is there's a reason we do the things we do now. And it's not always, oh, some evil person came up with this great idea and they're going to poison the world and kill everyone. Like, that's not what, that is not what the farmer and rancher is thinking about whatsoever. You know, maybe you get to some global corporations and there might be some like, hey, this is a really great way we can make some money. You know, that maybe we get to that point, maybe, but you know, never assume malintent where ignorance could have taken place. You know, that's a good principle for life. More often than not, people are just kind of dumb and they make bad decisions, and that's why we end up where we are. So anyways, mine was just totally blown, and I knew I couldn't stay working for this guy forever, because being a farmhand is awesome, you know, for a little bit, but it's no career if it's not the right size farm, you know. And there's like, you know, I bet you if I had stayed around for 5-10 years, I probably could have said like, yes, this is what I'm going to do. You know, ended up breaking up with his cousin though, you know, that fall. And I said, okay, well, now there's definitely not a chance I'm ever going to get any of this land. So, you know, so I look at that and I'm like, okay, I love farming, but also, you know, they slow down a ton in the winter. Like, there's no like, it's just cows all winter and fixing equipment. Like, he wasn't going to need me full time. So I was going to do some welding work for the welding shop, you know, cause I knew how to weld, but I was like, you know what? Like, I think I need to go find something else. Cause if I really want to come back to this, like, I can't be a farmhand. That was kind of like, we live in Iowa, farmland's expensive. Like, the idea of me being able to buy farmland on a farmhand salary, especially now, is just like, it's not an option. So I said, I'm going to go do some other things. And so I took a few years off. I went and, you know, I worked for a deer dealership for 4 whole days, and there's a reason it was only 4 whole days. And that's not a story I'll get into. So I worked as an apprentice tech for 4 days at a John Deere dealership. Said this is not going to be a long-term fit. And so I was just really upfront and honest with them. I was like, listen, guys, I want to be respectful of your time. I was like, I can either leave today or I can leave in 6 months, but this is not a place I'm going to be able to stay for 10 years. Like, just the work environment was not a place where you're like, yeah, I want to work with these people for 10 years, you know. And I was super upfront and honest about that. So ended up plowing snow for a guy, did some more wrenching. I plowed snow for my now brother-in-law. You know, I just met him, saw some Facebook ad for snowplow driver, and I was like, I can operate heavy equipment. I could plow snow. And so, you know, now we're almost 4 years from that, and now he's my brother-in-law, which is pretty cool. That's a whole nother story. Anyways, all that happens. You know,
we haven't found any cameras or any social media yet.
Yeah, we're getting there.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Oh, good.
Well, there's got to be a switch here somewhere.
Yes. So anyways, do all this for a few years. Facebook Marketplace, one day I see a drone pop up for like $500. So I had done an internship in high school where I did some photo video stuff. That's actually why I ended up graduating early. Was I wanted to start my own media company, but back then it was because that was at the time when YouTube was starting to like become a career of like, oh, like, you know, there were guys on YouTube like Casey Neistat, the original like YouTube vlogger who was traveling the world making all these cool videos. And I said, I want to start a photo video company so I can travel the world and do cool things like them. Took a different career path and worked for, you know, a couple people who did like, you know, during that time in Montana, I worked for someone doing photo video that just like drove me into the ground, like 20-hour work day. Like I would shoot all day and I would edit till 1 a.m. every night. And like, it was a great experience. Cause you know, working 20 hours doing anything a day will teach you a lot, but it just like drove me into the ground, burnt me out. I was like, you know what, I'm done. So that's when I started picking up some more of the mechanic skills and things like that. I said, okay, I need to do something other than photo video because this is not what I want to do. But, you know, this would have been 2021, I think. 2021 or 2022, I found a drone on Facebook Marketplace for like $500 and I had some extra cash sitting around. I was like, you know what, it'd be fun to fly a drone again. I haven't flown a drone in a couple of years. Like I was like, this would be fun. And so that winter I ended up just flying the drone around while I was plowing snow because it'd be 2 a.m. Like no one's gonna, I just drive back and forth in straight lines in a loader. Like I can steer with my knee and fly the drone. You know, don't do this if you're operating equipment, but I'm plowing with the tractor and flying the drone at the same time. And I made a couple fun videos and I posted on my little Instagram page and I showed them to the guy I was working for. And he was like, oh, that's pretty cool. You want to make a website for me? I was like, I think I could probably do that. I could probably figure out how to make a website. And so this guy ran a snow removal, my brother-in-law, he runs a snow removal and landscaping business. And I was like, yeah, I'll make a website. So I think I charged him like $1,000 for it, which paid for the camera I had to buy to then take the other photos, you know, because you can't make an entire website just off of drone photos. So I did the website and I was like, that's pretty interesting. And I, this whole time farming is the back of my head. I would go up and work cows with the guy I used to farm for. If he needed, like, I still go up almost every year and chop silage. I was doing that 2 weeks ago, So this whole time I'm making trips up every other month or so to, work cows or fix fence or just give him a hand, with whatever he needs. Cause I was working sort of plowing snow, but doing mechanic. I was basically just doing whatever I wanted to make money. It was great. It was a great time when you're a young single guy. I mean, there's nothing better than choosing when you want to work. And it was great. Anyways, so I saw that and I said, okay, well, I did this once. I could do it again. And there was a guy on social media who I had followed for a long time. His name's Aaron Witt. He does construction. He basically does what I do for Ag Now for construction. So his whole mission is to make the dirt world a better place. So excavation, mining, all that stuff that we need to keep the world running. And he just knew like, hey, we're running out of people to work in these companies. And it's like, I need to do something about this. So he started a marketing company, because he said, well, we can get people to learn about it. We can get awareness about this industry out. And I said, man, he's on a pretty good track. Like maybe I should try something like that. So I did, I think, one other construction company's website. And I said, it just like something fell off. I was like, this is not what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. And it finally clicked one day. I was like, oh my gosh, like the world knows nothing about farming. I'm going to forego any idea I have of doing anything else. And my family thought I was crazy. The girl I was dating, who's now my wife, thought I was crazy. Like everyone told me don't do it. And I said, I'm only going to do agriculture from here on out. And everyone said, don't do it. You have to pay your bills. Like, like be willing to take other clients. And I said, no, like I knew right then that I had to establish my purpose and my vision for what needed to happen. And I said, anything that is not agriculture is going to stop me from accomplishing what needs to be done. And so for literally like 6 months, basically, I barely made any money. I did I did a tiling company's website. I did a couple like one-off photo shoots here and there, but really like scraping by basically. Like my now wife was like basic, like I think I was paying myself $1,000 a month, which when you're a single guy, I was shockingly able to make that work on super cheap rent and eating chicken and rice every single day. And that's all I eat. Got married and my wife's like, all right, like, hey, we gotta like start making some more money because I can't just let my freeloading husband, not make any money. And so, I would do some side work here and there. I'd go do some mechanic stuff, but I knew if I'm gonna run this agriculture media company, it's only gonna be agriculture. I will say no to anything that is not that. And so for probably a year and a half, I did that. And it was basically like, every once in a while I have a project come in, make a couple $1,000s, have another project in, but it was like skimming the barrel of like, okay, like just off the top, like just enough to survive. But I was like, I just knew I have to only do this. Like for this to happen, I have to be 100% focused on this. And everyone thought I was stupid. Everyone thought I was dumb. And looking back, like, if I had kids at that point, I would have had to like quit. Like there's just like no other option. Like that would have been like, all right, this is stupid. But I knew at the time I was like, I can do this for a year and a half. And I just had a gut feeling. I was like, I know if I commit to this, it will pay off. And so, and especially in agriculture, this industry is about who you know, and it's a matter of how long you've been here. And after about a year and a half of basically nothing, but spending all of my time, I posted on Instagram every single day. I went on LinkedIn every single day, and I went to every single farm show that I could possibly afford to go to. And I would reach out to companies on Instagram, LinkedIn, and at farm shows, I would go to every single booth and I said, who's in charge of your marketing? Every single one. And I would try to get their card, or at the very least find someone who could give me the phone number. And after doing that for a year and a half, things just like a switch flipped, and like all of a sudden I was like traveling 24/7, had more work than I knew what to do with. And I was like, okay, this is what we need to be doing. And that's where I really solidified my vision. It was like, we are only here to serve agriculture. That is what we do. I'm not here to say, oh, we're here to make the prettiest photo and videos for agriculture. It's like, no, we are here to serve agriculture. And right now that's photo video, but in 5 years, that has to be something different. We'll do that because that's our vision, is because I knew, hey, this is what needed to happen. And I knew if we were going to solve the problems that agriculture loves to complain about, we had to come at it from a servant attitude of like, I'm not here to tell everyone what to do. I'm here to say, hey, what can we do to serve this industry to help solve its problems? And all right, like that is what we are now, is media marketing. Yep. And so fast forward a little bit, hired an employee, argued with the bank for so long. I don't know if you guys experienced that, but getting a line of credit is a pain if you do not have a ton of assets or someone else to code. Like it, man, arguing with the bank about a line of credit for basically a year and a half, trying to be like, all right, hey, I need $40,000, $50,000 so that way I can at least like secure the payroll of this employee that I need to hire. And so I was arguing with the bank for a long, long time. And I got to the point where I was like, well, my wife cannot have me traveling 4 weeks out of the month because that's a lot. Like, be present in your homes. That's something I really believe in. So, do all of that and still nothing from the bank. Hired someone. I was like, okay, well, we're gonna need some cash. So I ended up finding a guy. He found me. His name's Neil Denton. I don't know if you guys follow him on Instagram.
I think I do.
He saw a video I did for Farm Rescue at one point. I had done like one quick little project for Farm Rescue because they were in the area, and I was like, I love Farm Rescue. Why wouldn't I? And he saw that video and I was like, hey, you should come down, and come to my farm. I'd love to meet you. He wanted to get into the social media thing. He's in his mid 40s, he had done it for a while. But he's like, I know that if we want to do this, we should do it right. And so he called me and said, hey, what about you? What if I paid you to produce a YouTube channel for me and produce social media content? And I was kind of like wary. I try to keep, influencer life and all the stuff on social media kind of separate from all of our marketing clients, things like that. And that was very much like, all right, that's something I've never done before, even thought about before. But eventually he convinced me, is like, all right, just come down once a month and shoot for a few days. We'll make a couple of YouTube videos and we'll make a bunch of social media content. And so we did that for 4 or 5 months now. At that point, 4 or 5 months. And I just got to the point, it was bringing in a ton of work for me. I was like, oh shoot, like, man, like I am getting a ton of work off of this guy's social media because it looks super good and the YouTube channel looks great. And so I'm getting all these references from the YouTube channel because everyone's asking, hey, who's making these videos? And so I was like, man, like this might be a good fit. And so I ended up, him and I had become pretty good friends at that point. And I was like, as he's in his mid 40s, they farm a couple thousand acres. I was like, how would you feel about investing in my business and becoming my partner? Because I was at the point where, I'm sure you guys have felt this too, is like, man, we were the only one making decisions every day. It just wears you out. And being the only person to talk to about those things, like who really understands, it's just like the worst. And so him and I came to a deal. I was like, hey, you're going to put X amount of dollars in the business. I'm going to give you X percentage of it. And we ended up doing that. And let me tell you, looking back, that was like I tell people it's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life. It helped kind of solve my temporary line of credit problem. I was like, okay, I've got some cash that we can use to front the payroll of this employee. On top of that, now he can co-sign on a line of credit for us because he's got some assets, as long as I can put up some assets as well without it just being my entire life, And so we did that, and ever since then it's just been like, he's also been around, in the industry for a long time. So he makes a couple phone calls. He's like, hey, I got some references for you. Call them, see if they want to work with us. And man, it has been like, I'll give this to Neil. You guys should have him on your podcast at some point. But he, he took us from 2 people to almost 8 now. And I can like 100% attribute like 50 to 60% of that to him being willing to like, yeah, like let's do this and let's do it right. And so, man, here we are today,
There you go.
Yeah.
So that's the very quick overview. I'll stop talking. We can.
No, you're good.
That's the point. That's the whole point. No, that's awesome.
So one thing, and this is just, I guess, an observation that I've seen from what we've done, and you're out there working with these ag companies. Do you think we've moved far enough in the ag sector? At one point, I almost feel like there was almost resentment within a lot of ag when it came to social media and what I would call new media. And part of that, I don't know what you call it. Somebody was talking about this. I think you call it they call it like siloing. Like, I feel like in ag for so long, we've been in this world where all we do is talk to ourselves and we promote ourselves. It's like, it's the saying of preaching to the choir, I guess. And the example I'll give you is one of the very first pieces of social media content that we created for somebody outside of us. The person that and I'm not going to say the company we worked with, we still work with them some, but the guy that was running it, he came from print media. And we were talking about doing kind of a long form video and then breaking it up and putting the clips on social media. And the last thing he said to me when we got it all worked out, he's like, yeah, and hey, I might send a photographer down there to shoot some stuff for some print material. And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, sounds good. Bye. I hang up the phone and I thought, does he not realize that you can get, still whatever still picture you want from, and I go, this is kind of strange, And then they kind of wanted that content pushed out in farm magazines. And I was just like, these aren't the people that you need to reach for what you're trying to do, Yeah. And that was like when we first realized that if we're ever going to get this message, because we hear the same thing, we've heard it for years. Everybody talks about nobody knows where their food comes from. Everybody that's attacking agriculture. We just need to tell them. We just need to tell them that we're doing, I care and we're doing the good job and all that. But if you don't ever get out of the circle of people that believe what you believe, nothing's
you're not
ever
making a
change.
difference.
Yeah.
So when you started, is that a fight that still goes on? Do you think it's getting better or?
So I would like to tell you that I would love to tell you that like the industry is changing and it's shifting. I think it's funny that you mentioned silo because I don't know if this video ever made it to the light of day on my Instagram. I have a video of me like climbing about like halfway up a silo and like hanging off one of the rungs on it, like talking about how this industry is so siloed, how there's only a couple people in this room really talking and it's just bouncing back and forth all the way up and it never actually gets out, Yeah. I would like to tell you that I think it's gotten better. Our methods have changed. So like the reception to social media now compared to 2 years ago when I talked to businesses, like everyone now is convinced, yes, we need social media. 2 years ago, man, I was fighting an uphill battle. And I'm very thankful we are where we are now because we're in a really good position for that. But, we put a bid in for a short form video project with one of the commodity organizations for one of the states. Okay. So this was like a 6-month bidding process of like going back and forth, like, hey, what are your ideas? And, we sat down and had a meeting and the director, basically looked at me and said, well, if I could, I gave him our pricing and everything. Is like, well, if I'm going to spend that much with you guys, why wouldn't I just spend that on a TV ad?
Yes.
To which he said, because I know I'll get this many impressions and I know this many people will watch it. And I'm sitting there. I'm like trying my best to contain all of my snarkiness and my sarcasm inside of me because I'm like, okay, I am bidding a project for this. Like I got to keep my composure. And so I'm sitting there just breathing real deep, trying to keep my composure. And basically what I had to respond, like my response to that is always like, listen, I can probably, first of all, I was like, I bet you I can get you just as many impressions for a similar price. I'm also going to argue that the impressions we get are going to be far more meaningful than the things that people aren't going to. No one's watching ads on TV. You know what they're doing? They're
going
pulling
to
out their phone and scrolling. I was like, would you rather be the one being ignored or the one that at least you have the chance of people paying attention when they scroll by you while they're already like ignoring your ad? Yeah. And that would be my response to anyone who thinks that. It's like, yes, it has its place. If you're trying to do, brand awareness and things like that, I think it's great. But like, you really want to connect with someone, which is specifically like commodity organizations have two jobs: lobby and hopefully convince people to vote for the things they're lobbying for. And how do you do that? PR and lobbying. That's what you do. That like you have to convince your politicians, you have to convince the people. That's what you do as a commodity organization to keep your people who are in your commodity organization and paying their dues happy. And so all that happens, and we did end up securing the bid at a much like we had to like downscale a bunch of stuff for them to actually like want to spend the money. It's like, so I'd like to tell you yes, it's getting better, but everyone in this industry is still thinking the same way of like I like to describe agriculture as a room where there's a bunch of people in it and they all have known each other for 20, 30 years. And there's a new guy who pops in every once in a while and they end up leaving because no one ever talks to them because they're all hanging out with their buddies. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of like started to boil that down into like our business as well. Is like, there's things like there's meetings that happen or like different, networking is super important and all that. But this industry is particularly bad of like, if you are not in that room, you will be discredited or forgotten about. And I have said, well, you guys are all going to do that. I'm going to go over here and actually solve, like, let's take some of the meetings that happen at the, like the Iowa courthouse, for example. Like we have all these things. We are an ag state. Iowa is notoriously one of the biggest ag states. Like we do a lot nationwide for the ag industry. And so there's a lot of conversations that are happening in our Iowa government or even in DC that involve a bunch of us, a bunch of people from Iowa or a bunch of these companies and a bunch of these leaders from Iowa. And I'm sure they are doing something, but it's taking 30 years for things to happen in those rooms, which is great. I love that. I love that there's people who enjoy doing that because I have zero desire to hang out with politicians. What I always argue is that, listen, you guys can keep pushing the ball over there, but that ball weighs 2,000 pounds and you are not going to be able to push it by yourself and you're not going to get very far. Yep. And my argument is always like, listen, you guys do that, but we're going to be over here trying to make an impact online through social media, through the next generation, because you want people to vote the right way, get to them through the right methods. Don't get to them through those methods. Get to them through the right methods. And I'm not saying we should stop doing that, but I am saying like if we're going to put all this energy in, let's put just as much energy in over here so that way maybe we stand a chance. Because I was reading this stat just the other day. It's like there's like about to be like $30 trillion in wealth passed down from the boomer generation to the millennial generation in the next like 15, 20 years. And do you know what most of that's held up in? Farmland. Yeah. It's like, okay, we have way bigger issues than lobbying in Congress right now. We have so much larger issues than that because what's going to happen is this massive amount of wealth is going to transfer to the next generation, and these younger people don't want anything to do with it. Mm-hmm. You know what it's going to do? It's going to get split up and gone to auction, and it's going to get bought up by some large farm or some large organization, which, we don't need to get into the corporate farm things, but it's like, okay, yes, farms are not corporate yet, but we are moving towards that of like, it's the get big, get out mentality. And what happens when there's only one farm left? Well, the government runs it. And why I say this all the time is like, the last thing any of us want is the government growing our food,
100%. Yeah. And that's not what the consumer wants either.
No,
they don't want that at all.
But the consumer doesn't realize that we have this, we need people in agriculture. We are running out of labor. And everyone's answer is automation. Well, automation can only go so far. You still have to have someone to manage the automation of it. So we have this massive transfer of wealth to a generation who doesn't want the land, they want the paycheck. And on top of that, because of that and some other factors, we have no labor in this industry. Yep. So we are like heading in the next 15, 20 years for some super bad things if we don't get people back in this industry, and lobbying in Congress is going to do nothing.
No,
that's
right.
not going to.
It's not going to be fast. It's not going to get the job done fast enough.
All that's going to happen is we make H2A labor a little easier to get a hold of, but at some point we're going to run out of H2A labor too, because there's a lot of people who want to come to the U.S. and work, but also at the end of the day, like there could become a point where we have a hard time getting migrant labor as well, and like we don't want to be moving towards a world where the U.S. can't grow its own food anymore, and like
that's a big issue. And I wanted to just touch on your point of just like TV ads and versus social media. I think ag's definitely slow, and that side of media, they definitely are. We've worked with companies that are the same way. Dad brought up that example, but it's just crazy to me that social media has been around this long and people still have that mindset that the TV ad is better than the social media when everyone uses social media. Everyone has social media. It is the number one place to be if you want to market.
Yes.
And, Gary Vee always talks about it. The only ad that he would run on TV is Super Bowl. Yep. Super Bowl ad. Because that's when people actually watch the commercials, because they look forward to the commercials. Other than that, you should rather spend that money on social media, because it's exactly what you said. It's not how wide you can go. It's how deep you can go. you have to go deep. If you want to actually make an impact, you actually want to turn a stranger into a customer, turn somebody into a believer of what you're doing. Like social media is the way to do that.
And
it's the only way you can really go deep.
Yeah.
You can't go deep on a 30-second ad on a commercial. You can't really go super deep on a magazine. I mean, you can maybe write an article, but I just don't feel like it has the same oomph as social media content does.
We could spend $50 million, on a farmer grade ad for the Super Bowl or whatever, put it up there. And you know what? You're probably going to get a ton of orders. It's probably going to do great things. Chances it's not going to return are pretty high. But on top of that, if we're talking about in terms of agriculture, it's like, well, we also really want to work with companies that want to make an impact. And so we want them, if they're going to spend their dollars, to at least spend some of that highlighting some of their growers or the people they work with, not just like, oh, look at this product, look great. This is like, no, get the people who are paying you to be on camera and share their stories. So, we take that money, spend it on a Super Bowl ad. Yeah, you're gonna get a bunch of customers, but do we ever make that connection? No, you're probably gonna have way deeper connections by spending that same amount of money on a YouTube channel. Build a YouTube channel. Spend that money building a YouTube channel and audience, because you know what? If people aren't on their phones scrolling, if you look at the statistics, the amount of YouTube being watched on TVs at home is insane.
We get that comment all the time. People will put this podcast on their TV, watch it at home, put our YouTube channel on TV, This Will Do Farm, and watch it as a family. We get that comment all the time.
The best video performance-wise and revenue-wise we ever had on YouTube was an hour-plus long video on YouTube, because, and you can look at the stats on it. You guys know this. You can go to the YouTube analytics and you can see how many people watched on their TV or mobile. And man, the disproportional percentage to people who watched on TV on that video compared to the other ones was crazy, because what they did is they saved it and they put it on their TV when they got home and they sat there and watched it for an hour.
They said, hey, everybody watch this.
Like an episode of TV. They said, this is my TV now. I'm going to watch this hour-long farm YouTube video over putting on cable television.
I think and I get your take on this, one of the things that I feel like media has, not only media, but a lot of marketing people involved with these companies have missed, is this trend that people today have a much higher, I don't know if you want to say it, I'll just, for lack of a better term, they have a very high IQ when it comes to knowing if somebody's selling to them that's not genuine. And so that's why ad penetration is probably, whatever that number is, it's the worst it's ever been. Because if you aren't sincere in what you're doing and you don't believe in what you're doing, I think it's the same as the trend we see with kind of Hollywood and actors and the surge of reality television versus soap operas. Because people don't want fake, people want real, they want genuine. And if you are trying to sell somebody something, as soon as that consumer sniffs out that you're not sincere, they don't want anything to do with it.
This trend, that is the biggest thing that I've realized this year and last year, is just I think ever since COVID, people just don't trust. They're lacking trust in our government and our politicians and in the big food and big corporations, everything. And so people that, we talk about it all the time on this podcast, people that keep it real have the deepest rooted connection with the people that listen and tune in with their stuff.
Well,
that's what matters right now. It's not about the followers. It's not how many followers. It's not how many impressions. It's how many impressions, how many followers actually give a shit. That's what matters. Building a community is more important than ever before, because I think the influencer culture, that kind of culture, that kind of theme isn't people are tired of it.
So toxic.
They're tired of it.
I cannot scroll on social media anymore, because it's just like, follow me to do this course and make a bunch of money being an influencer.
Yeah.
Oh, here's the trick to get this reel to go viral. And it's like, okay, I've been posting on social media for years now, and you guys have been too. It's like, the people who have committed to it for the long term are not here to make a quick buck. They're, like you guys, here to build a community. And that's also where I tell companies this all the time that we work with. I was like, 2025 is the year of YouTube and deeply engaged customers and communities. It's not the year of pay this influencer to do this. It's not. No, it's building that connection at a deeper level, because we're officially at the point where there's too many influencers to keep track of all this. There's too many, and that's the hard part too, is half the influencers do just want to sell stuff. They do just want to make money, but and that's, you got to keep the lights on. You do have to pay the bills to keep the lights on. We run a YouTube channel without any sponsors, and I pay someone to produce. That's our only job. I lose a lot of money paying that guy, but I know that authenticity is more important. And if we're going to bring on a sponsor, I want to make sure it's the right one. But also I know that for us being mission oriented as a company, at the end of the day, I'll put my money where my mouth is and say that I would rather this not make any money for a while, knowing that it's for the right cause, and people, I heard it on a podcast today, intent comes with a smell. And if you have selfish or greedy intentions, whether it's now or in 6 months, someone's going to sniff it out and they're going to find it, and you're going to be the one thrown under the bus. It's very easy to tell that these days. And it's also interesting if you read the statistics, a lot of followers and a lot of viewers actually want the people they follow to take on sponsorships because they want them to be able to keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because they enjoy following you.
Yeah.
With that said, there's that earned trust of, I want you as someone who has a platform to be able to do this consistently and pay your bills and be rewarded for it. They want that for you as a trusted follower. But on the flip side, they also want to be respected because they gave you that trust,
Yeah, they don't want you to peddle junk to them.
And it's politicians are the best example of this, of make a bunch of promises, and
Don't
then never
keep any of
fulfill
them.
them. It's we wonder why no one trusts them. And it's the same thing in this space now. It's if you're going to do something, follow through on it, keep your word, and make sure at all costs you keep your viewers trusting what you're doing. Even if there's a misstep, be honest about it, have a conversation about it. And this entire online economy has only existed for a couple of years now, so everyone's learning at the same time. But if we're learning one thing, it's audience trust is going to be paramount to this, and that's where agriculture comes in. Of okay, this is why agriculture needs to be online telling their story, because it's the classic saying, if we don't tell our story, someone else will. And that's what's been happening, is these trusted online sources who just read a Wall Street Journal article or read some bogus study that some university in California in the middle of San Francisco did. And they say, oh man, ag bad, and influencer said that bad, so now I don't trust my food system. It's all over. The two things on social media these days, people trying to get rich and people trying to scare you. And that's not what I want on my social media. I want people to show up and be inspired every day. I want people to show up and watch what we do and say, man, I want to keep going, because they're going to keep going. We're in this world now where 98% of people online just want your money. Yep. Or, they want to scare you so they can get more views to make more money. And it's okay, well.
And really, they're not following that's the same practice that's what media runs on. So we've seen that now. We're to the point where whichever legacy media company you want to follow, the only stories that get pushed are stories that scare people, because they figured out that telling good news, there is good news out there, but telling that doesn't get ratings. The biggest that's why on the one hand, that, not to get political, but that's why the left had such a love-hate relationship with Donald Trump. Whether it ends or whether he becomes president, that part doesn't matter. They have wanted to keep him around as long as possible, because the best ratings they ever had was when they could all hate on him. Because they had a whole demographic of people that they had scared to death, to where that was good for the ratings. But we see it the same way. It's just so scare people to get views, to sell a product, whatever. It's too bad that it's that way, but it's kind of our society. But then at the same time, on the flip side of that, I feel like people have woke up to where they have such a strong BS meter that, man, as soon as they think that you're not sincere, they're done. And so it's a really interesting dynamic. And I don't know whether or not there's enough people, within our industry to get enough traction to solve our problems fast enough on the labor side.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you guys was like, I sit online all day. Like if you listen to any of the podcasts I go on or my podcast or really anything, like I'm a dude. I'm a very problem solving oriented person. I'm sure you guys are too. I like solving problems, and like that's what keeps me up at night is trying to solve these problems. And I also have to acknowledge like, well, I can't be the only one who thinks about this. Like, so what are your guys' take? I mean, we've got massive land transfers here very soon. A lot of it going up for auction. None of us being able to afford to buy it. Labor shortages, widespread we got a lot of problems, and I'm not going to discredit that they're small problems at all. But a problem's only a problem until we solve it, and then then we have a solution. So what are we going to do? Like, what are our steps forward as an industry that we all need to be talking about to solve some of these problems? Because I don't hear a lot of good conversations going on about it that aren't just automate the tractors.
Yeah.
Yep. I feel like telling like we do now, promoting agriculture in a positive light, getting young people interested in agriculture with just showing the best parts of it is a good step to get more young people interested to work in agriculture. I think that's definitely number one. That's a great thing.
Can I just give a shout out to your meat packing videos? Like they're some of my favorite things to come across my feed of just like, I wonder what Sawyer's packing.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
It's one of the more creative ways I've seen farm social media done.
Yeah.
So
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, that's just any way we can promote this industry to get people excited about wanting to be a part of it. I think that might help some of the labor problem, but that won't solve all of it. I think automation has its place, but I don't think that's the end all be all. I think that'll come. I think that's going to be necessary, but I think it's what you said. I don't think that's you still got people that have to manage the automation. If we do have autonomous tractors, we still got to know how to run the fucking software to make the tractors go. And if something goes wrong, we need to know how to fix it. I think this is kind of economics, but like, I think we're kind of transitioning from, working with China a lot as a nation to now Mexico, their demographics, they have the youngest workforce out there, one of the youngest workforces out there.
And youngest consumer base.
And they're our next door neighbor. And so if we can leverage, you see a lot of these, like deer specifically, they're building plants in Mexico because they know the labor's not specialized, but there's enough of it there. And so I feel like as a nation, I think we're going to be working with Mexico a lot more because of those demographics, and they're so close. And I think maybe their workforce will get more specialized as time goes on. So that's something I think can maybe work for the labor problem. I think immigration, it's one of those topics that politicians like to run on to say we're going to solve it, and then the other side says, oh, we're going to solve it. I think it could be solved, but I don't think either party really wants to solve it because they run on it and fundraise on it. But I think immigration is necessary. We need it. I think that we just got to figure
a whole lot easier.
It just needs to be a whole lot easier. Yep. It needs to be simplified, and I'm pro immigration if we can just find a system to make it easier and to become legal immigrant.
Yeah, I don't think people understand how badly our economy would hurt if like the immigration reform that every politician's ever talked about takes place. It's like, all right, guys, like you don't understand that, like, we love to give Gavin Newsom a bunch of crap for like, giving a bunch of legal immigrants stimulus money, but it's like, dude, that economy would have totally crashed if they did not do something because it is so dependent on migrant labor. I was in Colorado 2 weeks ago, not even like a week and a half ago. And I went to an onion field and there are like 200 plus Hispanic families harvesting onions by hand. Like, no, I'm sorry. No one from Denver was going to do that. No one.
And that's the sad part too. I think that's why it's so important that we do promote, like social media has done a disservice to the blue collar industry, the roofers, the welders, the people that build roads, construction. If you're not this young guy balling the fuck out and owning a Lambo and having all these chicks and having your own business, you're a failure. And that's what's getting promoted. And that's not realistic for most people. And we got to go back to be like, dude, roofers are the shit. Like construction workers are the shit. Like they build the stuff that actually people use. And like without them, like we'd be screwed. Farmers are the shit. Like if we didn't have farmers, we wouldn't have food. Like we got to promote these industries of and make young men and women feel okay that like, hey, what you do matters. It really matters. And like that stuff, that lifestyle that's being shoved down our throats, there's a lot of shit that comes with that too. And it's not the greatest thing since sliced bread. You know, it's what you do matters and what you work towards matters, and we need it.
Yeah.
And we got to put those kind of people on a pedestal. We really do.
I think just to add on to that real quick, like there's growing research and trends that the next generation cares far more about where they work and why they do their work every day. Like the next generation cares a lot about working for places that are going to make an impact, not just pay them. Like we're moving the way the podcast I listened to describe it is, 100 years ago, the business was a pillar of the community and employed a bunch of people. It took care of their employees. It helped invest in their community. It was something that was a hopefully good force for your town or for your state. And a lot of people would work for places because they knew like that. I mean, Deere's been built on that for decades of like, I'm going to go work for Deere because they're American made. They take care of their people and they support American farmers. Like that was like every Deere engineer I talked to who's worked for Deere for 20 plus years. That's why they tell you they work for Deere. It's because
they all live in Dike, Iowa. Like there's a town and it's like if you we went to a golf thing there, and it was like during the week. It was a hog deal, but there was but it wasn't closed. The course wasn't closed for the day. There wasn't that many people golfing, and that evening we were in the clubhouse, and I went around. It's like, hey, I'm so and so. Oh, I retired from Deere. And then somebody was there was like, yeah, this town is basically retired. 100%. That was what Deere was.
Yes.
But, and let's not pick on Deere. A lot of companies around here, Procter & Gamble in Iowa City, exact same way.
Yep.
People went to work for them and they retired with them. And they had a good pension, but we got away from that. Corporate America.
That's the down one.
Well, not so much corporate America as the S&P 500 stockholders changed that.
And we have moved, we've swung way up into the, massive, highly and that's why Deere has, gone the way it has, is because of the stock market, because of their shareholders. We've gone way up because their shareholders want immediate returns. They want to invest in a stock and in a day and a half make some money on it. Not, and that's how it's all gone. But the next generation very much is like, I don't care about the stock price. I care about, is this company going to take care of me? Am I going to make an impact in the world at the work I do every day? And there's actually, there's a new stock exchange. It's one of 5 that are open in the US. It's called like the long-term shareholder stock exchange or whatever. They just got certified a few years ago, but their whole goal is like, we want every company that's on here to know who their investors are. And so they're still thinking people who have hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars to invest. But they're very much like, we want, not that you can't trade on our platform, but you're going to know who's trading on your platform. And you're going to want, they want it to be people who are there for the 10, 15, 20-year returns. They want it to be companies that want to give their employees 30-year stock holdings because they want them to stay around for that long. And so I think we're going to see a swing back to that in the next decade as this new workforce comes in of like, hey, I do care about getting paid, but I care just as much about being taken care of well, and knowing that I have a positive impact on society in the world, which gives hope for hopefully farming and blue collar industries, because like there's nothing more rewarding than farming, blue collar work, or pretty much anything that like when you work with your hands, there's something very fulfilling about what you do every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like what you said, I've talked to you about that so many times. Like my dream with Farmer Grade, it's not about building like the biggest and greatest and most profitable and most revenue meat business in the world. I want to build impact. I want to do it the right way. Mm-hmm. And when I've talked about, what it could look like if we owned our own cutting facility someday, and, we owned our own warehouse, and we owned our own headquarters, and it could do cut, pack, and ship all in one. Like I've talked about, that thought of giving a shit about your employees is going to, I think you're so right. You need, like, look at First Form. We brought that up before we even got started, but I follow the founder, Andy Frisella, and I listen to him pretty regularly. And anytime you hear somebody come on that podcast, they always talk about how great the employees are, how bought in they are, how
how good the culture is.
And it's because they actually give a shit about the person, not them just showing up and doing the work for them in the hours that they're there. They invest in their people. They have a library there. They invest in them as far as their skill set, and they give a shit about their physical health and give them resources to work on themselves in that way. And it's just, I think as founders and as and small business owners and I think valuing the employee as a person is what we have to strive for.
Oh man.
It's having, like, when I think about a processing facility, how many processing facilities out there have state-of-the-art locker rooms or places to get ready to go on the floor? How many of them actually care about their physical health that are giving them gym memberships at the local gym, or even have their own gym for their employees to work in or work out in, or, you know, investing in the person, not just giving them a paycheck is got to be the move.
And let me tell you, like I try to take that mentality as well. As like, all of our employees are salary, which is like one of the greatest blessings and curses from a revenue standpoint. It's like, great, I know exactly how much money is coming out of my bank account every single month. With that said, is like, there's days like, there's a certain level of trust in it. You can't do this with every employee, but if you can build a culture around, and that's what we've been trying to do, is like so say for example, yesterday, one of my guys, he's super sick. He got the flu or something, and he was gonna work the next day. And he was telling me like how he was feeling. I was like, no, we're gonna find someone else to take care of your workload, and you're taking all of tomorrow off. Like, you're not gonna think about working. And like that sort, like, because he loves working so much for us that he's like, I want to get this project done, and he'll work a 16-hour day to do it. But it's understanding that employee would spend 16 hours a day trying to get a project done for me because he does really enjoy his job. The least I can do is say, you're going to take a sick day, and I'm telling you, you have to take a sick day, because he would have showed up the next day and forced himself to work. But like, it's understanding that your team, it's understanding that people need to be taken care of sometimes. Or it's like it's the same like mentality of like, oh, like we have 4 weeks PTO, which is a ton of PTO. For any small company, it's a lot of like money technically out of my pocket. But man, there's nothing better than hearing my employees come back saying, oh man, I had such a good week off. I'm so excited to be back at work. Like, there's nothing more rewarding than like hearing people say that. And that week they'll go and they'll work until 11 that night to get a project done. I've never asked a single one of my team members to work late. And I think every single one has. And I have to consistently tell them to stop working because I trust them. And they love what they do every day, because once again, we have purpose, and we got plenty of other problems, don't get me wrong, that we're working through. But overall, our team, like, I know that like if I need something done, they're going to get it done, whether that's, tonight or in 2 weeks. But it's a matter of like, if we got to press on something, they're going to take care of it, because I think there's a sense of trust. Is like, hey, I'm here to take care of them as well. Like that's how I feel about my position, is like, I have a responsibility to these people who trust me with at least 8 hours of their day. Like, I have a responsibility to use that time well and make sure that what they do during that 8 hours does not destroy their life outside of that 8 hours. Like, I want them to be like I had to tell one of our employees, she hasn't taken any PTO this year. I said, it doesn't roll over. Like, you need to take a week off before the end of the year, because we give them 2 weeks off at Christmas and New Year's. But I said, like, I want you to take a week off between here and then, like, because I know it'll be good for you. Yeah. But she very much was like, no, I'll just keep working. I'm good. I'm like, no, you're going to take that PTO. And if you go work and do other work, that's fine. Go work for someone else, go do some freelance stuff, whatever. But she would not do it unless I had told her to. But it's my responsibility to say, you should do that, because it's good for your mental health, which is important. And it's also good for your personal life. Like, go tidy things up in your personal life, clean your house, go take your car to the shop, do things that you might not do and push off until a later date. Like, spend time doing that, And it's just, once again, it's so rewarding, and people want that. That's what people want from a job these days,
Yep. They value that stuff way more than the paycheck, and that you're seeing that more and more.
And I think 90% of them would say, yeah, like, I would forego a higher paying job because of the way I'm treated here. Like, I think most of them would say that.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. You got any solutions on what?
Well, something we didn't touch on, and I think this is one of the biggest, this is the time bomb. This is the thing that's got to be figured out, and I don't know how you do it, is the part of our industry, the part of agriculture that is not being reached through social media, because they don't do social media, and the part that is going to play the largest role in that transition of what's going to happen to all this land is all the people that own it all. So all the older farmers out there that have this ground and don't have a transition plan and don't know what they're going to do. For one, we need a solution. We need a financial solution for young farmers that want to get started, that are willing to work out a deal with somebody to purchase their farm. I don't know what that looks like. And you're talking about getting politicians involved, and we haven't had a budget. Do you know we haven't had a budget in this country since, what was that I threw out there? It's like I want to say it's like 2012 maybe. There hasn't been but we've been running on a continuing resolution, and basically the Federal Reserve has been running our budget for us. So when I think about having to get a legislative solution to help young people be able to acquire farmland, I don't have a lot of faith in that. But then the other side of it is there's a lot of tools out there that can be done if planning is made. However, the people that have to do all that planning, they are the most difficult to connect with because they don't use traditional media today.
Yeah, and typically if they haven't come up with a plan yet, the chances that you're going to be able to get them to make up. Yeah, I agree. Succession planning and all of that. Like, man, every state I travel to, I hear almost identical story of, yep, this guy said they had a plan, this was going to happen, but nothing was ever written down. There was never a will. There was no estate. There was no trust. There was nothing. Yep. And it ended up a bunch of siblings never talking to each other again, and they all selling it out from under each other or owning it and renting it to a bunch of different people. And it's just like time and time again, it's the same story. Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, I kind of see, like, I think that we're headed to a time in agriculture of two different worlds. The one being the very large operators that are running traditional corn, bean, wheat, whatever, farming a pile of acres, trading equipment constantly because you can't afford to own it, and basically corporate. And then a group of people that can't afford to buy large chunk of ground, that are going to be very intent on building a community, very intent on building their personal brand, their farm brand, and finding a niche, and then using that niche to create the capital to grow, to buy land. But I think the void between those two groups is going to be huge, and that group at the top is going to be very tiny. Because the other part of that is the number of older farmers out there that they are willing to have, basically, they're going to get a seed corn trip in the wintertime, and they're going to get a chemical trip to go fishing in the summer, and the rest of the time they don't care. They'll work their fingers to the bone, and that's their life. Their identity is that fleet of equipment they have and that address they have. Okay, but when you hand that to the next generation, and we see this is why the divorce rate in agriculture, and I don't know what that statistic is, but I can just tell you from when you just think about our community and the people we know, the number of young farmers that get started, that come back home, they get married, and then they end up getting divorced because they try to run the life that their dad ran, and the wife that doesn't come, or vice versa, that doesn't come from agriculture, they're like, this is not what I signed up for. Mm-hmm. This is not the life that I want. You know, there is no balance. Mm-hmm. So as that goes, the gap between the people that are willing to run that lifestyle, to have that size of operation and carry that debt load and that stress level and everything that goes with it, I just feel like the middle.
Yeah, no, the age of the 500 to 1,500 acre farmer, especially in Iowa, is coming to a close. Mm-hmm. You know, the couple sub 1,000 growers I know in Iowa still, they hire everything out. They plant and they harvest everything else someone else does. That's all they do. And you know what they all do? They all have an off-farm job. They plant real hard in the spring, they harvest real hard in the fall real quick, and then everything else is hired out to the co-op, and their income is generated by something else, whether that's running your own seed dealership or, you know, working at a job in town, whether that's construction, you know, that's what they do, you know. And I don't want to see it go that way. I do not. Like rural America, you guys know, rural America is struggling hard. Like this country needs more people in small towns more than ever. And I talked with Joy of All Trades about that a few weeks ago. Like we have these communities that were once like great health. They're not perfect, but healthy communities. They had their own grocery store. They had their own little meeting places. They had their own little restaurants. And now it's Casey's and Dollar Generals across the entire country, at least in most of these small towns. And we're looking at all this and we're saying, well, this is just how it is. And I look at that and say, this is how it is. And this is how it's going. But like you're saying, like, I think there is a very large opportunity for direct to consumer food. Like I tell people this all the time is like, if you are not considering direct to consumer as an option for your mid-sized farm in the next decade, I will always tell people is like, listen, it's a lot of work. You got to basically start your own marketing company. You have to become a website developer. You have to deal with the USDA, which is never fun. You know, you have to deal with all of that and it's a ton of work, but man, like you guys know, I mean, the community you form around that is great. You guys have built your personal brand to the point where you can sell nationwide. But I mean, there's a little farm in the center of Cedar Falls, Waterloo, Iowa. They're like 5 acres. And you know what? They show up to every farmer's market and they bring like 2 enclosed trailers full of produce every time. And they have like 6 people who work there. And it is 5 acres. That is not a lot in Iowa. And they make it work. It's right in the center of town. Literally, it's surrounded by highway. And they make it work. And, you know, let me tell you, I love buying my produce from them. I love going to the farmer's market and handing my dollars over to them. Yeah, it's more expensive than the grocery store, but man, I'm like, I know you employ people. I know you're here for the community. I know that you grow your food to the super high quality. Yep. Like, man, there's just something like so cool about that. And if every community had more options like that, more people would buy direct to consumer. It's just there's this big gap. The reason growers don't do it is because they're like, well, there's no market for it. It's like, no, there is a market for it. It's just hard to get to that market. And then all the consumers are like, I don't know where to find it. And so there's a company that we've done some work for called Our Farms, and their whole goal is to is basically to create the Amazon of direct to consumer farming, which I'm like all behind it. I'm like, if they can pull it off, it's going to change the direct to consumer economy for sure. But stuff like that needs to keep being pushed because you're right. We're going to have we're always going to have commodities, but the way the commodity market is, like everyone's like, oh, the commodity market has its ups and downs. And you're like, yes, the way the commodity market is now, yes, it always goes up, it always goes down. But you guys know, I mean, those margins have gotten thinner decade over decade. And to everyone who keeps saying, oh, it'll go back up, I'm like, you're right, it will. But do you know what? These large companies know how much money they can make. They know the profit margins on farms, and they know how tight they can squeeze you before you go bankrupt. They're not here to make you go bankrupt. They're here to get you close enough that you survive another year and buy a little more when you take out that next bank loan. Yep. And so I do see very large commodity. I view the guys farming 5,000, 10,000 acres, you know, continuing to grow. But I think that kind of smaller, it's going to be, you know, either figure out how to become one of those guys and work your butt off to do it. And if you want to commit to that, then go for it. But also I'm like, man, you could do a lot with, you know, it's hard. Iowa's a bad example because we have ridiculously high farmland prices, especially if you have a mortgage on it right now. But man, like, you know, guys know how much hay we can grow here. Do you know how blessed we are in Iowa to be able to grow hay and feed cows here? Like guys out west are lucky, are lucky to get a couple inches of rain a year to grow hay. And we are getting 5 cuttings on good years. Like, oh, I got 4 cuttings. It's been a rough year. It's like, all right, guys, like you can grow so much meat in Iowa just based on our farm, just because our land is so fertile. We get great rainfall. It's like, there's so many options and opportunities. It's just, no one's really taking the risk to do it at scale. Like, it's like, yeah, what would it look like to have, you know, a 2,000 acre cattle ranch in Iowa? Like, what would that look like? You don't meet 2,000 acre cattle ranchers in Iowa, but I'm sure there's someone smart enough to figure it out. Yeah. I'm sure there's someone smart enough to figure out how to grow a personal brand, do the marketing, and distribute that. Like, it's doable. It's just, who's going to be that person to like stop complaining about their problems and do something about it? Because it can happen. So.
Yeah. And you know, earlier we were talking about how, the consumer, the rest of America that don't know they don't know the story of ag, or they're far enough removed that they really don't know where their food comes from. Yes, we have to do a much better job of showing what we do and educating people. But one of the problems that we have is, and we've made this example on the meat side, after something happens, when a market is mature or whatever, the consumer doesn't like the lack of choice. And so an example of that is like in the meat business, people like to talk that there's basically 4 packers that control the swine, control pork cutting facilities and marketing. And they don't like that. And they want to go after, everybody loves to hate on Smithfield or JBS. And what I say is, it's a little late in the game, because the way they got there was they were able to make, the margins in that business are horrible. And all the other people went out of business. They just did a good enough job of somehow making enough of a profit that everybody else quit. And now then they have this moat. And if you don't want that to be, if you don't want to have corporate government run agriculture, you can't wait till after it happens and say, boy, this sucks. You have to make the decision that you're not going to buy everything that goes in your cart and everything you consume by whatever the cheapest item is. And you have to support those people that are willing to do it. And it's really hard to do. But it's that way in so many industries. We get consolidated, and once it's consolidated, everybody's pissed. Mm-hmm. But we don't do anything about it as it's marching that way. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the answer is, but I know that
you vote with your dollars. I mean,
yeah, you do vote with your dollars, and that's the hard part. Is the coasts are getting there. The coasts are coming, the East and West coasts are getting to the point where they're willing to spend some more on their food, because they already have high food prices, but they also understand that, hey, bottom dollar probably also means bottom quality, and that's I am so thankful for the food security we have in the US, man. It should blow everyone's mind that you go into Walmart every single week and there's always food on those shelves, produce on those shelves. Like the logistical nightmare that it is to make all of that happen, we take for granted so often. I don't want to discredit that. With that said, shelf stable and mass quantity do probably lead to some sort of quality deficiency. That's just logical. So if we want higher quality food, we have to say, I have to spend a few more dollars on that if I want high quality food. And let me tell you, I work out every single day. I love buying direct from producer. Love it. It's only probably 20-30% of our budget that I can actually afford to buy direct from producer. Yeah. I would love for it to be 100 one day. I will want to work towards that point, but I am made of money, and that means I can't do that. I like pineapple. Where am I supposed to find a pineapple producer in Iowa to get pineapple? No, I have to go to the grocery store to get that from someone who shipped it from thousands of miles away where they grow pineapple. Yeah. That's awesome that I can do that. So it's finding that balance of, hey, who is willing to invest in their health, invest in higher quality food? Who is willing to also say, I would be willing to pay an extra price to know who grew it? I think that's another big thing that is going to become huge, is like you were talking earlier, authenticity online. People are going to want transparency in their food. And I think that's going to be a huge thing the government's going to probably start implementing. That we already have to keep records on everything and be transparent so we can track outbreaks. I think there's a world where we have some sort of software or some sort of database where, hey, basically every point on the food supply chain is tracked, and it's going to be publicly accessible, so people can literally where did this product in the grocery store come from?
Blockchain's coming.
Blockchain is coming.
Just buy your groceries with Bitcoin, and you can trace it every step of the way.
Well, and that's the thing is I tell people all the time, and actually I have thought about starting a company around this. I'm actually was thinking about it on the drive down, but I did some research on it. IBM and Walmart have already partnered on technology to do that. IBM and Walmart have been using blockchain technology to track supply chain in their food system for a couple of years now. Yep. And that's I tell people all the time, everyone says blockchain, you're like, oh, Bitcoin. It's no, supply chain. Yep. It's a perfect translation of the technology. Yep. It's just no one has figured it out at scale quite yet.
Well, and that, there's a story there, I'm going to beat the hog business. The hog business is one of the best closed loop food production systems there is. And I will, here we are, we use hog manure to fertilize our crops. Mm-hmm. We take that crop, we haul it to the feed mill that grinds the feed for those hogs. They bring the hogs to us. We finish them. We have solar on all our hog buildings. You might love solar. You might hate solar, whatever. But we're no-tilling our crops. We're doing everything we can to close that loop to where this year's group of pigs fertilizes next year's corn crop that feeds the next group of pigs. And we're doing that at scale. So, we custom feed pigs for a family farming operation. Granted, it's a huge family farming operation, and there's less family than employees now that are in it. But agriculture has a great story to tell. Mm-hmm. We just need to do a much better job of telling it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. All right. Well, last two questions here. What's your biggest, craziest goal or dream accomplishment you want to work towards coming up?
This year was 100 million impressions on social media. I think we're about 76 or 78 right now, which is I bet you we're probably higher than that if I dug into every platform. But just on Instagram, I think that's where we're turning towards. So I think one more quarter we'll be able to hit that before the end of the year. So that was our big one for this year. I'd say, there's so many. I'm a big dreamer. I'd say for probably, this is going to be a huge one, but I would like for in a decade, when people think of our company, they think of our mission, which is to serve agriculture, and also to know that our sole purpose is to hopefully try to solve some of these complicated problems. That would be my big goal, is I don't need 1 billion followers. I don't need 1 billion people to know what I'm doing, but I want, at least in this industry, when people think about what we do, to say hey, they're leading the way and at least trying to solve these problems, and not saying we have the answers. I don't want to sound super prideful and say, oh, I'm the smartest in the room. It's no, I know nothing, but I want to make sure my full energies are dedicated to solving problems that other people have deemed too complicated. Because I think if we open up that door in our mind and say it can be solved, well, then the whole world opens up in opportunities. If you dream, I always tell people dream big, and if you're shooting for the stars and you hit the moon, you're still on the freaking moon. That's sick. That's what I tell people is if we have these big problems in this industry that we need to solve, let's not say they're too big. Let's say they are big, and let's figure out a big solution to them. So whatever that looks like in a decade, I have no idea, but I want to convey that to as many people as possible. Hey, let's try to solve these problems. Let's not just complain about them. Let's take ownership. Let's say this is our industry and we can change it for the better. So let's do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be my big, big goal. It's just we would get that message to a bunch of people and say, even if it's not us solving it, it's just encouraging people hey, we're trying. So that means, I get messages on Instagram all the time when I talk about this stuff. They say, hey, I saw this thing that you did, or, hey, I listened to this podcast, and they're you inspire me to figure out how to change our family farming operation to last a little longer. Or hey, I've been ranching my whole life, and I got a message from a guy in Montana who I worked with 4 years ago. I forgot he even existed, and he messaged me saying, hey, I listened for you on Farm for Profit, and I just want you to know that you really encouraged me to keep figuring out how to make sure our 100-year farm operation can keep going in Mississippi. And I was man, how cool is it to know that even if it's not it's not about me or what we do. It's just the fact that hey, they see that people are trying, and they see that and say, I want to keep going as well. And if we can do that as an industry as a whole, man, we have such a good fighting chance. And that's what I tell people is let's not, if agriculture is going to, become some massive government run farm, let's at least not go down there. We have this pity mentality of oh man, woe is me farmer. I don't make any money. The industry is so hard. It's guys, that might be true, but it doesn't do anything to help you. Right. And so let's do something to help each other, to help this industry, to push forward, to solve these problems.
And the last one is just, what's your best advice you can give to, I don't know, your younger self, or just any young person out there that is passionate about agriculture? What can you give them for advice? And because your journey is just so unique of not being in it and getting in it and having a purpose. What advice would you give to them?
Well, man, that's the big one.
I know.
The reason the selfish reason I do this every day is maybe one day I'll be able to, start farming again. I farm as a hobby now. I help people. But I did have to come to at least where I live, I had to come to the reality is I either got to work for a farm for several decades and maybe one day they'll give me some land. And that's a big bet. My next option was say, get an off-farm job and maybe I can buy something in a hobby farm. And that's probably what's going to end up being is I'll buy a couple, I'll be able to buy an acreage with 10 acres and I can buy an old 40/20 and I can just farm sweet corn, which sounds like a blast. Like that's honestly I'm busy enough. That's probably what I'm going to have to do. And I would love the opportunity to do that. I would tell anyone who wants to farm or wants to get into this industry, guys, it's not impossible. And you have to accept the fact that it's going to be hard. I tell people that all the time. You're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to do uncomfortable things. What I always encourage people is there are old farmers out there who do not have kids to pass farms onto. And I kid you not, it could be as you could go to the yellow pages in a small town and literally just start calling people. It sounds impossible, but it can be done. I have one of my wife's best friend's husbands. He is taking over several thousand acres of farmland south of Des Moines from a guy that he met through an Iowa State program. Because he wanted to farm. He went to Iowa State for farming. He has a full-time job working in ag tech, but he wants to farm. So he has been working for this guy basically for free for years, and they've signed a contract where upon the passing of this older gentleman, the church the older gentleman goes to is going to get 10% of his land, and then the other 90% is going to go to this other guy.
That's pretty cool.
And it sounds outrageous, and I'm not saying it's impossible. It is a rare occurrence, but man, I have a guy that if I wanted to move to Montana right now would give me a portion of his ranch because he has no kids to pass it on to. They are out there. Spend enough time in this industry, you'll meet people like that. So what I would tell people is go find a job as a farmhand. Learn to work hard. Learn to do things you're uncomfortable with, and find the farmer who is not old and grouchy and is willing to have grace with you. I tell that people all the time. Don't find the 50, 60-year-old guy. Find the 30, 40-year-old guy who might still not own the whole farm, but needs help. I learned so much from Tyler, the guy I used to work for. And I look back and man, a lot of guys don't have the patience to put up with that, but there are people who care enough and need the help enough that they're willing to put up with it, And so it isn't impossible. Don't let yourself believe that. Do something about it.
Yeah. Well, man,
that's pretty good.
That's real good. We really appreciate you coming on, man. It was a great conversation. For you guys, if you want to find out more about Atlas and what Clayton's up to, where can they find you?
I'm Clayton.Atlas on Instagram and TikTok. My business partner is Neil Denton Farms on Instagram and TikTok. And then our website's atlasmediasolutions.net. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm not good at Instagram messages. I don't spend a ton of time on social media, which is funny because I run a social media company, but I do try to respond to people. If you have questions or you want to literally, if you want to call me, I am an open book. I've had people call me after going on things like this who just want to talk through ideas they have, or I'm an open book and I want to be as much of a resource for anyone as possible. If you have questions, just ask, that I tell people this all the time. It's not that hard to get a hold of people. Most people will respond to most people who have 100,000 followers will respond to you on Instagram still. Yep. It might take a few weeks and it might not be a super in-depth conversation, but at the very least, I try to go through all of my messages and have some sort of response for people. So reach out.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate it, Clayton. Guys, if you got any value from the show, share it out with the people you know. Leave a review on Spotify or Apple. If you want some meat, farmergrade.com. Use code BARNTALK, and we'll see you back here next week for another episode.